Ladies and gentlemen, the time is now 2 o'clock. I'll go ahead and call this policy committee meeting to order. And we do have 2 new school board members with us, Sarah Garcia, Kim Miller. Have a few policy changes, and with that being said, I'll let Dr. Krause take it away.
Okay, just a brief note of explanation. Mr. Foster asked me to talk to you guys a little bit in terms of policy. All of our policies are approved by the Missouri School Board Association, which is who does our policies for us, and they all have letters. For instance, the first one we're going to talk about is GCBDA. Anything that starts with a G means that that's a personnel policy. The second letter is either going to be a B, a C, or a D. A B, it means it applies to everybody. A C means it applies to certified staff. And a D means it applies to classified staff. So this one being a GC policy means that it's personnel and it's certified staff. Basically, all of the policies we're going to talk about today the changes have been recommended by MSBA because of statutory changes at the state government level. For instance, this one is because of House Bill 432, and it requires us to put in a section about the Victims' Economic Safety and Security Act. So that is the essence of it. It doesn't change anything else in our policy, but in order to be compliant with House Bill 432, we need to add the verbiage which is on the last page and a half of the policy. It starts with number 12, Victims' Economic Safety and Security Act. So unless there are any questions, I would ask that you would pass that along to the full board for approval. Any questions from anyone? Okay. Going down on the second item on
I'm
your
not sure if
agenda.
you said it, but did you state that it was, this one is particularly tied to legislation?
Yes, to House Bill 432.
Yeah, okay.
The next one on the agenda is GDVDA, Administrative Form. Anything that's an administrative form means that it does not have to have board approval. It's an information type item. So this one is just the administrative form that goes along with that policy, explaining the short-term leaves, and they're acknowledging that what we'll have to do from the HR office is send out an electronic notice to all of our employees that this particular leave is available, and they'll have to electronically sign it, acknowledging that we told them about it, and then we'll just store those electronically like we do a bunch of other things. So that's all that there is with that form. And as I said, that's just an information item for you. The next one down, Roman numeral 2.2 GCBDA. That's the support staff leave. Again, it's a GD policy. Those two are backwards on the agenda.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Yep, that's okay. So since it's G, again, it's personnel, and since it's D, that means it applies to our classified staff. It's the exact same verbiage that was in the first one we talked about, because that Missouri House Bill 432 applies to all employees, whether they're classified or certified. So this is an exact replica of the policy that we talked about first, and the verbiage about it is again under number 12 at the end of the policy. Any questions or concerns about that one? Okay. Then there is an identical administrative form after that, just like we did for the other policy, that we will send out to each employee, requiring them electronically to sign it to give us acknowledgement that they're aware of the leave that's available to them. Roman numeral 3 is JGA, corporal punishment. I know that some other people in the room may have some information about these, and go ahead and jump in if there's something that I need to point out that I don't. JGA is our district policy on corporal punishment. Corporal punishment is not allowed in the St. Joe School District already. It's not against the law, but it's something that we've chosen to say we're not going to do corporal punishment. So there really is no change for us in this policy other than on page 2, the word isolation is taken out, and we'll be talking more about that here in just a minute on the next policy, JGGA. But first of all, on JGA, we're just removing the word isolation. Are there any questions or concerns about passing this one along? From anyone?
Did you plan to get into the isolation?
Yes, so that's in the next one, coming up, JGGA. Okay, we're now on Roman numeral 4, JGGA, seclusion and restraint. Incidentally, so any policy that starts with a J, that's a student policy, deals with students. Okay, this one's seclusion and restraint. We have 2 experts on this in the room here, at least 2, maybe 3, so I'll let them jump in. This is again due to House Bill 432, and it talks about requirements for seclusion and isolation and restraint. Policy used to say seclusion, isolation, and restraint. They're taking isolation out of it and basically rewriting the whole policy. So if you noticed in what was sent to you electronically, basically the entire policy is struck out.
It's all revised.
Yeah, the entire policy is stricken, and then they start over in the red print.
Want me to jump in?
Yeah, if one of you two would just give a brief overview of what they're wanting here.
So isolation, which is what they got rid of, isolation is basically if you were going to have a student isolated in a space where they were alone and there was not a lock on the door. So if the student is being physically aggressive, in some of our most restrictive placements, there have been peace rooms where that student can go to calm themselves down. There are doors, there are no locks. So that would be isolation. Seclusion is something that we don't use in our district because it would mean locking a student in a room without another adult in there as a de-escalation practice. Well, in really the way we operate, if a student is being harmful to themselves or others, we need to be with them. And so we do not use seclusion as a general rule. So seclusion is still left in the policy, isolation is out. There is also restraint. Restraint is something that we train our staff in, MANT restraints, MANDT. And staff have to get recertified every year in order to do that. We would rather, if necessary, a student be restrained if they were being dangerous to themselves or others. And when we say dangerous, we don't mean flailing around or kicking. We mean they are going to injure themselves or someone else, to have them restrained. The other piece of this law that has changed is in regards to reporting. So the reporting piece has tightened up greatly. And the primary pieces that have tightened up are the time frame in which you have to notify the parent. Now I believe it's 1 hour, no later than 1 hour after the end of the school day. So a parent would need to be notified at that point, by that point. The other piece is the reporting data that needs to be sent home and shared with the parent now includes any involved staff member along with their certification. So it would have their name, their title, their certification, and their role in the incident, which is a piece that has not been included before. Other than that, it's pretty similar. So the isolation's been taken out, the reporting piece is different. And we do reporting, we do collect data on every isolation, every restraint that occurs in our district. It gets reported to a member of our department, and that's reviewed regularly. So it is something that has occurred and does occur on occasion, but only when a student is harmful to themselves and others.
About how many incidents per month would you say?
I can't, you know what, I don't know off the top of my head, but I can find out for you.
Yeah.
That's real easy because we have that data. Oh, the other piece is, I forgot, this is a very important piece. When I talked about like having the little room that didn't have a lock on it, now they're saying those can no longer be used. So if the student was going to be, if you were gonna separate a student due to dangerous behavior, they would have to be in a normal sized classroom. So they would have to be in a room this size, void of anything in it that they could harm themselves with. Which would be problematic in some of our buildings. But we try not to use any of these pieces unless absolutely necessary. Thank you.
Interesting.
Are these across all grade levels?
Yes, but as you can imagine, it would get increasingly more difficult the larger a student is.
Sure.
Yeah.
Are you talking about the space, the room, or if we utilize this?
Right, if you utilize it.
Yeah, no, it's any level.
Yeah, okay. I mean, obviously, but junior high to high school is your
Correct.
most problematic region, right?
Correct.
Have you noticed any increase in that recently? I'm hearing all the time about the junior high level particularly has a real discipline problem compared to in the past, kind of.
No, not with isolation and restraint or seclusion. I don't believe that's increased at all. As a matter of fact, I would say it's probably decreased just because when we kind of shut down for COVID and we were doing a lot of virtual and we weren't in school a whole lot, I think some of those practices were maybe in some buildings, if it was being overutilized, that break slowed it down a little bit to where it's not being utilized there as much.
And by definition, right, keeping someone from being involved in a fight doesn't meet the definition
Correct.
of restraint as it is defined in this policy. So that's a different piece. So if two students are getting into a fight and a teacher intervenes and tries to separate them, whatever,
That's not
that doesn't
restraint.
fall under this
Okay.
kind of policy. This is really more with special services than general population.
You were mentioning about the rooms.
Okay.
Does every building have a room?
No. Primarily where we have students who are eligible under an emotional disturbance and our most restrictive placements, because they are regularly physically aggressive, would have rooms. However, those, and we're not fans, just so you know, that's not something we ever.
Yeah.
But that would be something that would have to be looked at. Those spaces would have to go away and be used for other things.
Yeah, no, thanks for that clarification. I didn't realize most of this is geared toward the special education piece of it. Okay. Because I was grouping the general discipline
Oh, yeah,
as a
no.
whole. I realize this has different rules you got to follow because of the student you're dealing with, right?
Correct, but you can, seclusion and restraint can be used on any student. It's not just for a student that has special education services. But that's primarily where it would.
Yeah.
There are people trained in each building with MANT training, so if need be, there would be trained people.
Do we still have ISS classes? Do we? Okay.
At middle school and high school.
Yeah.
Okay, so just to bring this all together again then, this House Bill 432 is the one that required these changes, and House Bill 432 basically revised Missouri Statute 160.263. And so the language in red at the end there basically was lifted right from the statute. And so our recommendation is, in order to remain in compliance with the statute, that we would adopt that proposed language. Any concerns about that?
I think it's pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
Oh, I should have added, also we will be doing some training. So our 2 MANT trainers that we use for the restraint training will be receiving training next week from Ed Council. to thoroughly review this and how it will impact and affect our practices in the district. And then there will be professional development provided to building administrators and the necessary staff prior to school starting in the fall.
Okay. Any other questions or comments on this one before we move on? All right, the last one on the list is EVBC, lactation support. This again was tied to the House Bill 432, and it really is not going to require much, if any, change from what we're doing currently. According to the new law, there are 5 provisions that have to be met, providing a minimum of 3 opportunities during the day to express breast milk. No problem with that. We are already doing that. Make accommodations for at least 1 year for that to take place. We're already doing that. This mirrors fairly closely what's already in the Fair Labor Standards Act, which is what we were following. Having a designated room in this building, it's just down the hall up here on the 2nd floor. That it has a sink with running water and a refrigerator for storage. We are already doing that. And then it has a designated room, has ventilation, a door that can be locked, work surfaces here, and convenient electrical. So we were already doing all those things. The only wrinkle in this that I don't know that we've ever been asked to do it says the policy now addresses members of the public who are nursing as well. In section 191.918, it allows breastfeeding or expressing milk with discretion in any public or private location where the person is otherwise authorized to be. So if we were having a meeting here and someone said, hey, I'm going to need to use your nursing room, we would do that with the same requirements that we do for any employee. So it could be a community person that's here visiting for whatever reason for that.
This also includes.
Yes, that part is new, about members of the public using the space.
And this also includes students as well?
Yes. And again, it's while we were already doing 90% of that, like I said, the only part that's new is the part about the public, and that won't be any problem for us to accommodate that. It is, again, required by statute, so we're requesting that you pass this along as is to the board for approval.
And there's a room at every high school?
That I do not know. There would have to be, if there's not, then we would be putting one in.
Because I was looking and it says that the policy has to be adopted by the
Prior to
beginning of
July 1. Yeah.
July. And I mean, I know that there are students who have babies who do breastfeed, so.
Right. Dr. Sechrist, do you know her answer to her question about the high schools?
I know that if we have anybody, if they get their counselor, we make accommodations, make that work now. I'm sure we're doing that, but I don't know that we have anybody currently doing that, for sure. But, I mean, obviously, we will have to because of the law, but we would have worked with students at any time to do that.
Because it may be that they're not doing it because they don't know they can. I mean, I went to school a long time ago, but I didn't do it just because I was in school all day, but I didn't have a way to express breast milk, so
Right.
that's why I was asking.
It doesn't have to be a permanent room, you just have to be able to have
A
those
space.
locations,
Yeah.
a space that can be
Running water
utilized.
can be locked, a sink, electricity.
So because we don't always have
Mhm.
somebody who's doing that on a daily basis.
Just not a restroom though, right?
Right, it
Right.
can't be a restroom. Any other questions? Not, I think, Mr. Foster, we're at the end of the agenda unless you.
No, I think it's all pretty straightforward. Just keep in mind, April 27th at 5:30, we'll be voting on these policies. And,
Okay, so it is a recommendation of the board to go forward?
yes. Would you guys agree?
I agree. Kenny?
I'm not familiar with it, I'll make a decision then, probably.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm a vote with this leader on it.
So at this point, we just need a motion to adjourn.
I make a motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Thank you.
Your job and I.